So let's learn how to work with inheritance in Java. Go ahead and create a brand new project. Click on File, New Project, click Next, and we'll just call this Inheritance. And then go ahead and click on the Finish button. That will create your brand new project for you. And then I'm going to go ahead and wipe out some of the dead comments to try to clean the space up so we can see a little bit better. And go ahead and drop my curly braces down because, you know me, I sort of like things to line up, and that's how I like it to look good. So first thing I want to do is I want to create a brand new class. And I'm going to create a class, a generic class called Vehicle. Now parent classes or base classes are considered more generic than a subclass or child class. And that allows us to build other classes based upon the parent and then making them more specific, or in other words, adding things to the child class that will give them attributes and methods to make them more detailed of something that's more specific of a parent. Like a vehicle could be a base class and a car could be a child class, or a bike could be a child class. A person could be a base class and a student could be a child class, or employee could be a child class. In other words, the lower you go in the child, the grandchild, the great-grandchild, they become more specific than what the parent class was. So let's go ahead and create a class called Vehicle. And in that Vehicle class, we want to go ahead and add a public attribute. Actually, we'll go ahead and make it protected, which means that it will be visible in this class and any subclasses and also within the package. We'll say protected, and it'll be int, and it will be seats. In other words, for this object of type vehicle, we're going to keep track of the number of seats as an integer value. And we could go ahead and add another one, protected string, and we'll call it name. That'll just be the name of the vehicle. Then let's go ahead and make another class that's more specific. Class car extends vehicle. This now says I'm going to make another class that is going to be more specific than the vehicle class. In other words, what makes a car class more detailed? And we could say that we have a private, which means it's only going to be visible in this class, not even subclasses. Private int miles per gallon, MPG. This now means that if I create an object of type car, it will have the attribute MPG along with the attribute seat and name from the parent class. And that's because they're protected. Now, if I had a private attribute up in the parent class, a child class would not receive that private attribute from the parent. I can make one more class. We'll call it bike, and we'll say that also extends vehicle. And what makes a bike different from other vehicles is that a bike can have the number of gears. And so we'll say private int gears. And I'm going to come back up here and change my miles per gallon to be a capital M to be consistent. So I now have three classes. Bike inherits from vehicle, car extends or inherits from vehicle, and vehicle is going to act as my base class. Now that I have my attributes set up, I'm going to come back into my parent class. Notice where I put my cursor, and I'm going to right mouse click, and I'm going to choose Insert Code. And I'm going to go ahead and make some constructors. This constructor, first of all, I'll leave everything unchecked and click Generate. That makes a default constructor, meaning that it's not receiving any parameters. Once you make any other constructor in a class, Java then says hands off, and it's not going to make any default constructor for you. Because by default, it does make one. You don't see it, but it exists. And I'm going to come back here and make another one, right mouse click, Insert Code, Constructor, and I'll say that I want to have both of those items. So now I have overloaded the vehicle constructor, meaning I have more than one constructor of the same name, but the signature is different. One of them doesn't receive any parameters, another one has two parameters, one of string, one of int. As long as the signature is different, we can have as many constructors we want. In fact, I could take this constructor, copy it, And that's saying you can't do that. You've already got one with the same values. Well, what if I change that to be x? Doesn't matter. It's not looking at the name of the parameters being passed. It's looking at the data types. So what if I did this? What if I said int seats and string name? In other words, I still have two parameters, one string and one int, but it's a different order. And that works because the signature is different. I could also come into this method, make sure you see where your cursor is, right mouse click, insert code, and I could choose getters and setters. And I'll select all of them, and it will make all that code for getting and setting the attributes. The getName method says it's public and it's going to return a string, and it's actually going to return the name attribute. If I wanted to, I could put the keyword this in front of that, and it makes it just a little more specific that it really knows I am returning an attribute. Let's go ahead and drop down into our child class, car, and let's make another default constructor. Right mouse click, insert code, constructor. And your screen might not look the same as mine, but I'm going to go ahead and just click generate, and it makes a default constructor. Now, the one thing you always want to do, since this is inherited, we want to make sure we call the parent constructor. And the way you do that is by saying super parenthesis parenthesis. That now says whenever we call the car constructor to make a car object, we'll automatically call the parent constructor also. Now, why is that? Well, we don't really know what happens in the parent class. We could go look at the code, but maybe we received the code from someone else. So we want to make sure that the parent does all of its job, and then when it's done, we'll go ahead and do anything we want to do. I could overload that constructor, insert code, constructor, and let's say that I want to go ahead and do all of the items for the vehicle and miles per gallon. I'll click generate. In this case, it says it now created a whole bunch of constructors. It made one that said it just receives miles per gallon, one that says miles per gallon, the name and the seats, and another that says miles per gallon, seats, and name. What's happening here is with this constructor, it says receive the miles per gallon and just assign it to the attribute of the car class. This one says receive all three of those, and since some of those actually were received from the parent class, the first thing that it does is it says let's call the parent constructor and let's pass those same values we just received when we tried to create the car object. That will then jump up to the parent class, pass the data into its constructor to instantiate the attributes in the parent class. But remember, when you create the car class, it gets everything the parent class wants to give it. But the rule is, if you have a class that inherits from another class, you always call the parent and let it do its job. And then we can come back in and do whatever we want. I'm going to go ahead and create getters and setters also in this class. And we'll do it for the vehicle. Click generate, and it creates the getter and the setter. Now, why would I do that? Having a private attribute means that I can only see MPG within the class. If I want to change that value anywhere outside of the class, you're going to have a getter and a setter in order to do that. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing down in the bike class. Right mouse click, insert code, constructor, and we'll just go ahead and create the name and the seats and the gears. So now we said we're going to receive those three parameters. Then I want to go ahead and make a default constructor also, and I can even just type that in if I want by typing public by parenthesis parenthesis curly brace curly brace. I've now got all my three classes set up, and I want to go ahead and add one more, and then we'll move on to part two. I want to add one more class, and we're going to call this class wheels. And within this class, I'm just going to have an attribute, and we'll make it public int, and we're going to call it size. And that'll be the size of the wheels. What I want to do now is show you that you can come to the bike class and make another attribute there. Public. You can make it public or private. In fact, we'll go ahead and keep it, we'll keep it public. Public, and I want to make an array of wheels, because a bike can have more than one wheel if we want, but we'll say every bike has two. So I could say public wheels, AO wheels. The AO is for an array of objects. And I want to go ahead and create new wheels 2, meaning that one of the attributes for the bike class is going to be an array of wheels. And there's going to be 2 wheels for each bike, which now gives you access to the size for each wheel. You'll see how this works in part 2.